I really did value my time living in Jamaica. It gave me a window into, yes, how Jamaicans live and how this particular family lived, but also just a correction. Until you live in another culture, you only have your own experience to go by. And so this was so eye-opening and so important as a formative experience that I cherish it, and I value all of the interactions that I had and all of the people that I was living with who treated me so well. It's if in the U.S., if you brought somebody into your house, study abroad, right, you would do your best to be gracious to them, but it would not be as warm and decent as what I experienced among people who had really no reason to care for me, right?
At some level, they cared for you both because they loved Bob and they trusted him, and he wasn't bringing through a whole host of people. Like he didn't have a research assistant every year. Like you were there working with him that year, and I'm just totally guessing here, but maybe 1 year in 5, maybe he would bring someone down to work with him, right? So this was rare. This wasn't just a constant sort of circulating tribe of random undergraduates from the US. But also, you were real with them, and you were living in their home, and you were legitimately befriending and enjoying the food, and not complaining about the fact that you were showering with a bucket that you had to dip into a pool. I've lived with you in those situations in other places, and I know for sure you didn't complain, even even if it wasn't optimal. But especially again, I think you were there for 7 weeks, and it's everything. For 7 weeks, everything is still just amazing. Even, the legitimate hardships of life where you don't have functional running water or reliable electricity. And, oh, by the way, the cops in riot gear may suddenly show up when you didn't even know the cops were present. Those things, are we live, Zach, still? Okay. You were learning from every single thing that you were doing down there. And this is one of the things we used to say to our students when we would do study abroad is, yes, we are going to be studying evolution and ecology and animal behavior and tropical biology and philosophy of science, and statistics and all of these things. But part of the reason to go is that we are now going to be living in someone else's culture among other people. And we hope to, we require that you be respectful and understand that you are guests in their culture and home. But we hope that you can manage to befriend and, learn to admire the different ways that different people do things and understand, the ways in which your life as Americans is actually privileged and unique, and the ways that America's got it wrong too. What have we lost with all of the resources that we've got? This is something that was said to me and to us in Madagascar a few times. The observation from people that, you Americans, which they saw very, very few Americans to the degree they saw any Vaza, any white people. It was mostly French people. Americans seemed to show up with lots of stuff, meaning we had boots and backpacks. Lots of stuff meant just that we could put shoes on our feet. But you may not have the family connections that we have.
Oh, right. And there's also an exchange of wisdom that I thought was really profound. So I recall, I often invoke Uncle Vernie. Uncle Vernie was a great guy. He's a mechanic.
Yeah.
And he was one of these guys who was just, super capable of figuring out a solution when the thing that when the A-level solution wasn't available. He had, B through Z, somewhere in his arsenal. But I remember one day I was trying to lubricate my bicycle chain, and I didn't have bike chain lubricant. And he brought me some corn oil, and I was like, I'm not so sure. And he said, Bret, the wrong lubricant is better than no lubricant. And to this day, and there's a couple of instances where that's not true, like the pawls of a ratchet. But
why?
Because if you put a lubricant that is too thick, they can stick. But in most cases, there might be a best lubricant, but what you really need is something to lubricate the things, because otherwise they rub together and tear the apparatus apart. But anyway, there's that. But then there was also the other thing, which I found, I still think about it a lot, which is there was this gaggle of kids who ranged from very, very young, like
3,
yeah, to kids who were maybe, 12, 13, 14.
Mm-hmm.
And they were really fond of me because I would answer their questions. And they had a lot of bad information coming to them. A lot of it over, TV and stuff. You get bad info. And
American TV is what they're being exposed to mostly.
Yeah. Now they find me confusing because I frequently tell them I don't understand what they're asking me because they speak in patois and my patois is weak. And they don't even recognize, the kids don't, that they speak 2 languages. They're code switching between school English and patois. And so
school English is not patois. It's American English.
It's American English, yes, with a British accent. But anyway, it's so this gaggle of kids was, they were constantly following me around. And I remember I was reading The Unbearable Lightness of Being, I think, was my book that I was reading. Yes, and there was a point at which, I think it may be the end of the book, I hope I'm remembering this correctly, where there's a scene where they have to euthanize their own dog. And I knew I was going to cry. And I wanted to be alone. But this gaggle of kids would not take the hint. And so everywhere I found a quiet place, like, kids would descend on me. Yeah. So anyway.
What, I don't remember, was it one of the kids or someone else who asked you, is the moon that we see in Jamaica the same moon that you see in the United States?
Yeah, that was Prince. Yeah. That's a great question.
And it points, there's honest inquiry there. Yeah. And, unless you too can answer all the questions on that list that you made about why the seasons and why the solstice and why the 2 tides and all of this, don't feel superior to someone asking a question like that just because that happens to be one of the things that managed to get through education, get through to you in education.
Oh, and especially, I remember being kind of dismayed. At one point I found a copy of the Weekly World News. And the problem is the Weekly World News looks like a newspaper.
That's one of these tabloids,
right? Oh, it was the most ridiculous of them, and I think the particular issue I was looking at, a woman had given birth to an otter or something. Just pure nonsense, right?
It's lizard people before it's time.
Yeah, exactly. And so anyway, you've got just garbagey information that in the U.S. you would know to discount, but it shows up looking like a newspaper in a place where they don't even have, they're not connected by phone, so there's no way to correct bad info. And
but high literacy. So, that something like that falls into people's hands and they actually do take it in, which is actually, potentially a downside of literacy in a place without good written word.
Yeah, we don't think of that downside of literacy, but it potentially is one. But anyway, so the thing, Prince's question was a good one until for sure. I mean, very distantly separated places, but there's, it led to several different discussions because, okay, it's the same moon. Is the phase the same, right? Well, if you think about it, why is the phase the same? It takes you a second to put together why that would be. And, anyway, we could go down that rabbit hole and we shouldn't.